Hey, what's up everyone? Danny here. In this video, I want to talk about some wrestling. So the basic tenets of wrestling, including some of the stuff you have to have for wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and even mixed martial arts. All right, so when I teach the sport of wrestling, there's four main concepts that I like to teach. The first one is your stance. The second is going to be motion. Then your third concept is going to be your positioning. And then the fourth concept is always the controlling points on your feet. All right, so in this video, I'm going to cover the first two, which is your stance and some motion. All right, let's start with the stances. There's two basic stances you're going to use in the sport of wrestling. The first one is going to be your squared stance, and the second one is your combat or staggered stance. All right, so now let's cover the first one. Your squared stance is going to be just your feet on the same line, on the same square, just below your shoulders. So how do you get this? Depending on the size and height that your athlete has, especially when I teach kids, I'll have them jump up in the air and land on both feet. And that will naturally have your regular stance. That's the good basics of where your feet should be spread apart, okay? So from the side, just jump up, and wherever you land, that'll be your position for your square stance. From this position now, I'm gonna create an angle so you guys can see a little bit of the front and the side. From this position here, what I like to do is always have your hands onto your knees, and now start to bend down like this. Once I've bent down like this, it's almost like I'm in a squat position. Now I'm going to start to drop my elbows right in front of my legs like this. This is my squared stance right here. I have to make sure that my head stays up, my butt is low, and then I keep my knees bent at all times. And my arms are in this position in order for me to protect against shots. If anyone tries to grab a leg for a single, double leg, okay, they throw in, my arms should be always my first line of defense to protect my legs so I can't be taken down, all right? So that's the basics of how you should position yourself in your squared stance. So once again, head is up high, butt is low, knees are bent, all right, back is straight, and then you have your arms or elbows are leaning onto your quadriceps like this, and you're always looking in front of your opponent. Of course, you can start to move your hands around, but this is your basic defensive stance. Now, let's talk about motion, because I talked about the second thing is always how you're going to move. So your motion is going to be from the squared stance first, is every time I want to start to move one side or the other, I have to move that lead leg first, okay? So let's say, for example, I'm circling around my opponent and I want to go in this direction, my right side. So my right foot is going to take a small step as I drag the left foot back. And if I'm going towards my left, same thing with the left side. Now notice my feet are almost sliding on the ground. It's just short, choppy steps. This is what I like to refer to it, baby steps. Now, it's important that when you start moving and you use your motion, if I'm in my squared stance like this, I don't want to be bouncing up and down. You see how my head is coming up every time? Every time I'm elevating, my head's coming up. That leaves me susceptible for that shot. So now, I always want to make sure that my head stays. Imagine there's a ceiling just above my head, and I don't want to touch the ceiling. So wherever I start to move, my head stays exactly where it is using those short, choppy steps. And I'm always stepping and gliding. So you're stepping and gliding, stepping and gliding. So when you're wearing wrestling shoes on a matted surface, you're going to feel that. And you're always using the mats as traction. That's why wrestlers wear those wrestling shoes. There's a lot of traction underneath, so that way there you could start to initiate that offensive move when you're ready, okay? Now, one more mistake that people do is when they start to move is they elevate their feet off the mat like this. I'm exaggerating just for the demonstration of the motion, but the moment I start to raise too high off the mat with my legs, that is taking me too much time to move. So if I'm moving like this, taking steps, that's too slow, and that will leave me susceptible for that shot. So I don't want to leave myself in a position where it's going to take me too much time to defend the shot. I always want to be ready for that shot. So once again, squared stance, short, choppy steps, I'm moving in a circle, and if I move to the other direction, it's the same thing. And this is a great drill that I have my athletes do all the time, is I'll have them move in a circle like this, and in my kids' classes I'll do that, as well as in the adults. And I'll do a drill for a set amount of time, and what I'll have them do is get into this squared stance, and then I'll go left, and they start to move. And then right, and they start to move. Left, and they start to move. Right? And as a coach during this drill, what I'm really looking after is the positioning of their feet during that motion, as well as keeping their knees bent and their head on the same level the whole time they're moving around. All right? So that is your squared stance. All right, next one is going to be your staggered stance. All right? Or sometimes we just say that offensive stance. Now, one thing to always point out is the first one, which is the square stance, this is your defensive stance. Now this next staggered stance is going to be your offensive stance, okay? This is the one you're going to use to try to score on your opponent. So back leg is out on a 45, front foot is leaning towards your opponent, all right? So my lead leg is always centered between my opponent's feet, all right? Right in the middle, right in the middle. So my lead leg is pointing right here between both knees of my opponent. And now my hands, again, head up high, butt down. My backhand is always the one that's going to be controlling or going in for that shot or even tying up, all right? I want to use this one for my tie, and this one here is always going to be the one that's protecting. It's always still gauging, it's dynamic, but this is the one that's going to be protecting my lead leg. Back leg, front leg, always in position. This is what we refer to as the lead leg, and this is what we refer to as the trailing leg, okay? So that's your staggered stance. Now, the motion on this one is going to be particularly the same, but there's one thing you have to be careful. When I start using motion into my staggered stance, from here, I always want to be moving towards my lead leg, all right? This is going to be my step. I'm always here. The reason I want to do this is if I do the opposite and I start to move towards the inside as such, where my back leg is, if I start moving towards my trailing leg, what's going to happen now is I'm susceptible, once again, furthermore, for that takedown. So watch this. If I'm using this side to move away from my opponent, all right, I'm always leading myself in between his legs to score. And I'm staying away from his takedown. But if I start to move towards the inside here, now I'm opening myself up for the angle for my opponent to score on me. So I always want to make it more challenging by moving towards this side, which makes it difficult now for my opponent to shoot, where he has to reset his position first, all right? So make sure that when you move using your staggered stance, although it's okay to practice both sides in a circling motion, ideally, if I'm facing an adversary in a competition, I always want to be moving towards this side. This is my lead leg first, and that's where I'm going to move. And if I'm going to move towards my right side, I should be switching my stances at all times, and now moving this foot first. Okay, so this is stance and motion, the basic fundamentals you should have for wrestling. All right, guys, so there you have it. The basic pieces for your fundamentals in wrestling, NoGi Jiu-Jitsu, that you should have, all right? So in the next video, I'm going to talk about a part 2, which is going to cover the continuation from what we discussed today, all right? So make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't so already. Make sure to leave a thumbs up to this video and make sure to train hard. We'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.